won't believe what Hollywood tried to hide about Van Johnson. Imagine this. It's 1940s Hollywood, the golden age of cinema. On every movie poster is a freckled, red-haired dreamboat with a grin that made teenage girls swoon and moms nod in approval. That was Van Johnson, the clean-cut, all-American boy next door. But behind the wholesome smile and starched suits was a man caught in a web of secrets, studio contracts, and forbidden love. And the most jaw-dropping rumor? That he once slept with 8 actors in one night. Wild? Yes. But let's rewind and see how we got there. Van Johnson, born Charles Vandell Johnson on August 25, 1916, grew up in Newport, Rhode Island, in a home that felt more cold than cozy. His mom walked out when he was still a kid, leaving him with a distant father and a head full of dreams. By the time he hit New York, he was all in, hustling through nightclubs, vaudeville shows, and scraping by until someone finally noticed his charm. And boy, did they. He landed gigs on Broadway, and soon enough, Hollywood came calling. MGM scooped him up, and suddenly, Van was everywhere. He wasn't just acting, he was America's sweetheart. He played the good guy, the soldier, the best friend, the boy you bring home to your parents. And during World War II, while many big stars were off fighting overseas, Johnson, who couldn't serve due to a brutal car accident that left him with a metal plate in his skull, stayed behind and stepped into the spotlight. Films like A Guy Named Joe, The Human Comedy, and 30 Seconds Over Tokyo made him a household name. He became a kind of comfort food for wartime audiences. Familiar, sweet, and safe. But there was more to him than dimples and dance numbers. In 1954's The Caine Mutiny, he stood toe-to-toe with Humphrey Bogart, showing real dramatic chops that surprised a lot of people. And whether it was musicals, dramas, or TV guest spots, Johnson kept evolving. He could sing, dance, play instruments, act. He really was the total package. Off-screen, he was polite, polished, and always had time for fans. He wasn't just loved, he was trusted. But behind the scenes, a completely different story. In 1947, Van married actress Eve Abbott. Sounds romantic, right? Not so fast. Eve had just finalized her divorce from actor Keenan Wynn the day before. And here's the kicker. All three, Van, Eve, and Keenan, were close. Too close. Hollywood insiders later spilled the tea. The marriage wasn't love, it was a cover story. According to Eve, it was arranged by MGM's all-powerful boss, Louis B. Mayer. Why? To squash rumors that Van was gay. In those days, being outed could end a career in a heartbeat. So the studio stepped in, crafting lavender marriages to protect their assets. And Van? He went along with it. The stakes were too high. The couple had a daughter, Skylar, and Van became a father figure to Eve's 2 sons from her first marriage. But happiness was never really part of the package. Eve would later describe their home life as cold, distant, and full of silence. Van was moody, withdrawn, and emotionally unreachable. A far cry from his upbeat screen persona. Their marriage limped along through the 1950s, surviving only as long as Mayer's influence did. But after Mayer died, so did the charade. While performing in London, Van reportedly fell for a young male dancer from the show. According to Eve's son Ned, Van didn't just have an affair. He left the family for this man. After years of separation, the marriage ended in divorce in 1968. Now, about that infamous rumor. Over the decades, stories started surfacing about Van's secret life. Behind the glitz and glam, there was an underground Hollywood where closeted actors could be themselves, at least behind closed doors. Private parties, late-night rendezvous, and whispered names filled the social circles of a hidden queer community, navigating a deeply repressive system. And that brings us to the jaw-dropping claim that Van once had a marathon night with 8 different actors. True? Exaggerated? Who knows? But enough insiders told similar stories that it's become part of Hollywood folklore. Names like Roddy McDowall, Farley Granger, even a young Rock Hudson have all been linked, though none of it was ever confirmed publicly. Still, the whispers painted a clear picture. Van was a man trying to carve out pieces of freedom in a life built on lies. Even Ed Wynn, father of Keenan and Van's former father-in-law, once joked, "I can't keep them straight." Evie loved Keenan. Keenan loved Evie. Van loved Evie. Evie loved Van. Van loved Keenan. Keenan loved Van. Funny? Yeah, but it also said a lot about the complicated love and loyalty tangled up in all their lives. Later in life, Van slowly stepped away from the spotlight. He moved into a penthouse in Manhattan, then eventually to a care facility in Nyack, New York, where he passed away in 2008 at the age of 92. His death was quiet, far from the flashing cameras and fanfare of his heyday. By the end, he was estranged from his daughter and living in near solitude. A bittersweet finale for someone who once made millions feel comforted just by stepping onto the screen. His legacy, though, is layered. He wasn't just a heartthrob or a war-era icon. He was a symbol of the dual lives so many in old Hollywood were forced to live. So when people talk about Van Johnson's rumored flings or his supposed wild nights, it's not just gossip, it's a reminder. A reminder of what it cost to survive in a time when being yourself could end everything. He lived a life full of performances, on camera and off. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, go ahead, like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves classic Hollywood but isn't afraid to dig a little deeper. Because sometimes, the real drama wasn't in the movies. It was in what the studios never wanted you to see.